Without objection. I recognize the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Spartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Samaniego, do you believe in the rule of law?
Pardon me?
Do you believe in the rule of law?
Absolutely.
So let me ask you a question. You were talking about asylum seekers. How many of them are actually legitimate asylum seekers, cases percentage-wise, based on the current law?
I think that's an impossible question because they have the right to say that they have credible fear, and it's not my position or my role to determine whether that's true or not, but that's the court.
What the cases, when you go and look at these cases, what is a percentage of them actually legitimate? What do you assess? That is actually was not abuse?
From the stories I've heard and what they go through and how they're persecuted in their countries and how, you know, how they're treated, and it's not economically driven as much as it's fear driven.
So what is the percentages actually that could be legitimate? No, when I was in Texas, you know, a few years ago, and I talked to some people there, I actually been in El Paso too, it was under 10%. I'm not sure if this number changed now, but would you say that majority of them are not?
Well, I mean, you're asking for a non-objective. I mean, I can't.
Okay, then let me question. If there are a lot of illegitimate cases, do you think it hurts legitimate asylum seekers that actually can be killed by their government?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they're seeking to get away from their difficult situation, but I cannot tell you. That's up to the court.
So do you believe that, you know, and I agree with you that it shouldn't be where the court really should be doing it because we're delaying the process, you know, and do you believe that have such a large number of people at the border doesn't allow us actually to help legitimate people that could be dead? Because we have some people that very desperate people, don't get me wrong, life is tough in a lot of countries. There are a lot of things, you know, that is real bad. But we have people really in a life and death situation. Do you believe to have such a scale of people coming to the border and maybe abusing the system and cartel take advantage of some of these people actually hurts legitimate people?
Well, that's the broken system. I mean, we're asking, the system says you have the right to express credible fear.
But the system should be checked at the border and should be go in the first port of entry. So there is a lot of abuses of the system. Do you believe we then need to tighten a little bit asylum procedures from our standpoint, that Border Patrol can do a better job, that we don't have to wait for a lot of cases that when they get to the court system? Do you think it's illegitimate?
I can tell you that the number of times that a migrant is vetted is unbelievable.
But they're not vetting for credible fear right now because they're so overwhelmed that they just say, I have a credible here. Cartel gives you a piece of paper, say what you say the right thing to do, and they just let you go, and hopefully they give notice to appear. Some of them don't even give them anymore because they cannot process it. It's becoming a situation where it's becoming, no one can handle this amount. So do you believe we need to improve that from your perspective, that it's not enforcement issue, that enforcement a law needs to be tightened? Is that?
Absolutely, it needs to be improved, but I think you're not giving us a solution. It's not an easy solution for us to determine whether it is or it isn't credible fear, because the law says that if you express it, then we have to accept
Well,
it.
at least we agree something the law maybe need to be tightened because we're really hurting the people. Do you believe that cartels making so much money on desperate poor people that the message spread, they all come to the country, is really hurts legal immigration, but also it's really creates a modern-day slavery because these are desperate people. Do you believe that would be characterized like that?
Well, what I've said over and over again is that if you stop the process, you help the cartels. When the process is moving, it's very difficult for them to do the things that they do. When you push them back to what is...
Do you don't think all this money actually are helping them to empower them and control now almost the whole border with a lot of money, have better resources than our Border Patrol has? You don't believe it helping them because all of these people pay them a lot of money, and from desperate countries, they don't make enough money to pay unless they become enslaved by these people.
I agree, but every time that the process stops, that's when they get abused, they get raped, and so there's people that legitimately can come into our country if we can help them process and get them quickly moving. Less likely with a
And
cartel.
I think we need to work on that. Maybe we can at least find common ground on that. And what would you say, Sheriff, from your experience, what really needs to be done? And we have like a few seconds left to really find common ground to stop this insanity.
I'll talk fast. I actually spoke with Secretary Mayorkas about putting judicial oversight at the southern border so they can address these asylum claims, these credible fear claims. As we know, the high percentage don't qualify under law to do that. Secretary Mayorkas stated, I 100%, that's a quote, I 100% agree with you, Sheriff, but we've seen no action over last year to get that done because we could address it at the border, not within our communities.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you.
I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Dunn, I also want to convey my condolences at your loss of your son, Noah. I'm a father of 4, and every day I pray for my children. I'm also a Little League dad, and I've seen young children go from promising athletes to drug rehab. Terrible situation. Drug abuse, the scourge in our society, does not discriminate. Working hard to make sure nobody falls victim to the scourge. And Sheriff Daniels, I also want to thank you for your good work.
Thank you, sir.
I have a brother that served the LAPD for 30 years.
Thank you for your service.
He's got some interesting stories.
Yeah, I bet you do.
You mentioned human trafficking. You mentioned $3,000. Is that the price to smuggle a human being to this country?
No, it's 7,000 and up to be smuggled by the criminal cartels. For the drivers that are coming to my county, going to 3 hours north to Phoenix, Maricopa County, it's $3,000 per person.
I just got back from Central America, and the going price now is about $22,000. And most of the women, 80% of the women, by the time they get to El Paso, to our southern border, are either raped or sexually abused.
Yes.
And I would say that that's a lot of desperation, putting yourself at risk. A woman preparing herself for that eventuality and paying $22,000.
I would agree.
You know, like many of us here, I've had the opportunity to go to the southern border, El Paso, San Isidro, Canadian border as well. My job in Homeland Security. Only have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to talk about the San Isidro border crossing. When I usually cross that border, come back to the U.S., I identify myself to the border agents, tell them who I am, ask them how's the day at work going, and usually get average answers. One day, agent told me, look behind you. See all those cars? I said, yes. He says, they are essentially filled with Russian and Ukrainian undocumented immigrants. I said, it's new? They said, no, it's been happening for a few months now. Well, the Russian-Ukrainian war started. Those undocumented Ukrainians are now Ukrainian refugees. April of 2022, less than a year ago, I went back to San Isidro, actually to Tijuana, Mexico, to visit a refugee camp of Ukrainians. This is what I found behind me. Mexican government took a baseball field, turned it into a refugee camp. The Mexican police were guarding that camp to make sure those refugees were safe. American private and public donations poured in. Doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals came in from across the country to make sure healthcare needs were taken care of. This became a processing center for Ukrainian refugee camps. Refugees would come in 24 to 48 hours. They would board a bus, be driven to the pedestrian West Crossing. Title 42 would be waived. They would get a parole status and walk across the border. This is an example of how you deal with the refugee crisis right here, ladies and gentlemen. This doesn't look like El Paso. This is the way you address the refugee challenge. The Biden administration, thankfully, is now working on implementing a similar program, parole program for Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. But we still have the Afghanis that fought alongside our troops that are still hanging out there somewhere. Same thing for Syrians. And Sheriff Daniels, I ask you those questions because it's an issue of incentives, folks. Very, very desperate individuals you got to give them a reason to go through the legal process because they are desperate. And the refugee challenge is not just the United States. It's a worldwide issue. And the solution isn't just here. Our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, have to be part of the solution as well. Under existing laws, this is the way you do it. I'm out of time. Chairman, I yield. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. Mr. Dunn, our prayers are with you and your family for the loss of your son. This hearing is designed to bring to Washington the concerns of the people at the border about this border crisis and seek out its origins, which are clearly down at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue in the White House. From day one, this administration has blatantly ignored U.S. immigration laws and policies designed to keep America safe. And after several visits to the border myself, it's clear we need border enforcement now. The open border and amnesty policies have made this crisis worse every single day. It encourages more vulnerable populations to make what is a very dangerous journey. Americans should be outraged by the Biden administration's failed leadership. On January 30th, KFOX 14 in El Paso reported on Border Patrol reports in the article entitled Unprecedented Number of Migrants Reported in El Paso in the First Quarter of 2023. More than 64% of the migrants encountered during this time frame were single adults, some attempting to evade arrest and not seeking asylum. Unaccompanied children encounters increased by 59% in the last fiscal year of 2022, the same time frame, as opposed to 8,000 unaccompanied children encounters. El Paso sector recorded only 5,000, so that's up. The sector led the nation in the first quarter of the fiscal year with total migrant encounters across all 20 U.S. Border Patrol sectors. Agents apprehended 37 individuals with criminal records, rescued 61 migrants, including tender-age children, some abandoned in the remote desert, and intercepted 22 narcotics loads. A defense attorney in El Paso, a juvenile defense attorney, stated youth are getting more involved with crime, huge increases in weapons, and he thinks it's just because they're getting money to pay for these weapons, and how they're earning that money is from drugs. I see a lot of kids are helping the human smuggling, and that's a big problem. Although, Judge, you stated in your testimony there's no invasion of migrants in our community, nor are there hordes of undocumented immigrants. Crimes against citizens are causing havoc in our community. When you see an increase in children helping human smuggling, how is that not the case? How is it not the case that these policies are contributing to the delinquency of minors in your area?
And once again, I don't see the correlation of things that are going wrong with our country and sort of saying that it's influenced by our immigration or people coming through. Like I said, we don't see that. We try our best to deal with the circumstances at hand, and then we try our best to move people along. And I've said over and over, you know, you guys have the luxury of being Democrats and Republicans. We have to be public servants, and that's all we can do. When they come across, we do not manage who comes across. We manage how to process them in the most possible, you know, the best possible way. And I've said over and over, El Paso really thinks as a nation. You know, I think people think that we just focus on our situation there at the community, but we don't. We're really concerned about having New York having to deal with that, having Chicago deal with that. We've talked to each one of the mayors, and we're working. I think if we were to put in more of a national system of allowing communities to say who needs the migrants, and then helping us to process them there. And I use the Houston model is just exceptional. Every single day, 52 come in, they go back to Houston, they go to the bigger hubs, and we move them through. And so that's where we need your help. We need your help, not to whether or not what we're doing is right or inaccurate, but the fact that it's a community that really shoulders a tremendous amount of a broken system.
Well, and you say that the transportation of these individuals to other cities is necessary to prevent your community from descent into chaos, correct?
No, that's not
So
true.
you're fine keeping them all in your jurisdiction instead of sending them to other locations?
We would welcome them, but it's a shame that, that they're concerned about being close to the border because of how they're going to be treated and how they're going to be deported, even if they shouldn't be deported. So you've got migrants wanting to move into the interiors simply because they don't feel safe, even if they're here processed and legal. Once they're processed, they're legal in our community. And so, once again, I think we're helping the nation do the right thing.
Gentleman's time has expired. The Chair recognizes the gentlelady, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle seem to have called this hearing to really promote fear-mongering or disinformation in order to justify a radical plan that would effectively shut down asylum to everyone. And the plan is so extreme that their Republican colleagues have objected that it's ineffective, inhumane, and even un-American. And what I find particularly pernicious is the attempt to conflate the issues of migrants seeking legal asylum through our legal processes with the very real scourge of fentanyl trafficking, which, as CBP data demonstrates and Judge Samaniego has testified, overwhelmingly comes through the ports of entry in trucks and cargo ships, not on the backs of migrants trying to flee poverty or violence in their home countries. By falsely suggesting that migrant families seeking asylum are the source of the fentanyl epidemic, we can't even start to craft policy measures that could actually address either of these issues, the fentanyl crisis or the humanitarian issues raised by the push factors in South and Central America and our immigration laws. So I don't want to waste this opportunity, and since most of my experience before coming to Congress has to do with how badly broken our immigration laws are, I just wanted to focus there. How do we handle the increase in asylum seekers at the southern border with real fixes like some of those that Judge Samaniego has suggested? As I suggested, we do need to address the root causes of migration, but we need to have functioning pathways here in this country that people can pursue. I mean, I've represented enough folks seeking asylum to know that there aren't functional pathways. I think we heard a statistic that only a small percentage of people seeking asylum are actually entitled to it. That's not true. The statistics vary very widely across the country, but in some areas, particularly on the border where there are less friendly judges often, the rates are very, very different than in other areas across the country. So, Judge Samaniego, you are not an immigration judge, are you? You don't adjudicate asylum claims.
We do not.
Okay, I did want to clarify that. Now, a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the border and speak with Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security agents, and advocates, and did see that there is a humane processing process available there. And I really appreciate that. Why do you think that's been so successful over the years, particularly when compared with other cities and counties along the border?
I think one is that we've accepted to be humanitarian, and when you do not start at that point, then you don't create processes, you don't create ways to handle them, the NGOs are not working with you, the Border Patrol doesn't work with you. So I think the moment that you make that determination that you're going to be humanitarian, it forces you to come up with systems to help out. And there are some, for example, there's things that we could do. The Venezuelan population dropped tremendously as soon as the Border Patrol has an app that you can now, from your country, you can begin to apply. And we're talking about vetting the credible fear. So you're able to do a little bit of that, and the numbers drop tremendously. I think also I was able to talk to the ambassador from the U.S. to Mexico, and he talked about what do we do at the origin. The point of origin is very important because we know that, for example, why is Colombia not treating Venezuelans properly, and then Venezuelans have to leave their country to come to our country. And so it's not just a pull that we have a push that we need to look at as well. And so, I think if we get creative, but I think once you start with the idea that you have to, it's safety, that we have to make sure that the economy is taken care of. You know, El Paso was one of the strongest economies in all of Texas. You know, we were one of the strongest. And so while we're dealing with the situation, we have to worry about the economy. So the economy, the safety, and being able to do the right things from the humanitarian. I think if you start from that premise, I think things are more solvable. If you start from the premise that you don't want them here, then what's the solution?
Well, and I do want to pick up on that, because over the past few months, Texas's governor has sent dozens of busloads of vulnerable migrants to Philadelphia, which I represent, without notice or coordination, which of course has made it more difficult for our willing city authorities to welcome those folks. But when you have 2 buses dumped on New Year's Eve morning before 6 o'clock, and you have vulnerable people without coats, it's very difficult. So I appreciate your insight that cooperation can smooth over many of the issues that we're dealing with. I see my time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany.
Judge Samaniego, you said in one of your answers earlier that people come here because they're passionate, and you've advocated for allowing people to come in here. Do you think that's a reason why we should allow people into America on a legal basis, because they're passionate to come to America?
Well, no, I said they were here for different reasons. They just happen to be passionate as an additional component. I mean, they come because they're fearing what's happening in their community. I've talked to, like I said earlier, when they tell you that every day their mom or their dad calls them and says they come here looking for you every morning and they want to know where you're at, that's why they're moving in this direction.
Thank you. I'm really glad this issue in regards to Governor Abbott moving people to various cities around the country has come up. Have you been critical of Governor Abbott for what he's done?
Absolutely, absolutely, because when you send someone that's not organized and they don't know who's on that bus, and some of them are not sponsored, that's a huge burden on that community.
Have you been critical of the Biden administration when they've flown people all over the country in the dark of night?
I don't know of that taking place. I apologize.
So you have not seen, for example, I have an article here entitled "Biden Administration Quietly Flies Illegal Immigrants to New York in Middle of Night," and we just heard from a fellow member on this panel saying they're doing it in Philadelphia also. Do you think that's right for the Biden administration to do that?
Well, I think it's an indication of that they have to decompress, because when we get flights that are going out, it's to decompress the system there with the Border Patrol, and has nothing to do with their community.
So did you give the benefit of the doubt to Governor Abbott and say, well, maybe they're decompressing these people on their trips to these cities?
Well,
I mean, isn't it the same thing, Judge Samaniego?
No, it isn't, because it's not coordinated. We've never gotten a call from the governor to tell us, hey, what do you need? How can we help? How can we do things?
No,
and we just get buses.
I really
leave.
appreciate that. Biden administration quietly flies illegal immigrants to New York in the middle of the night. That's what they're doing. We'll be happy to share this article with you so you can see what's happening there. Thank you for your answer. Sheriff Daniels, I was in your county in June of 2020. What's changed since June of 2020?
Well, we went from, just to put it in perspective, around 5% of my jail population was border-related, up to almost 45% now, 45%. We've seen the pursuits. Last year, we put 180 people in jail for pursuits that were deadly pursuits. When I say deadly, driving at 100 miles an hour plus, endangering communities. Some resulted in deaths. Some we interdicted before they killed somebody. We see the flow of public safety challenges in our community based on this border every day. So it's changed drastically as a result of this border.
Because what I heard from you sheriffs is that there was good coordination all the way from the local level, all the way up to the federal government, June of 2020. And that there was some control the border was becoming more secure. Is that generally an accurate statement?
Yes, Congressman. In fact, Border Patrol, when I pull up to the scene to help my deputies, the troopers, officers, or agents, they always make a point to come over and say, Sheriff, thank you for what you do. Thanks for being a voice for us.
We heard earlier that, I can't remember who it was that said that the increased fentanyl is not tied to illegal border crossings. Do you agree with that statement?
No.
And why not?
The criminal cartels are exploiting our border, whether they're trafficking children, adults, males, females, whether they're human smuggling for profit, or they're doing illicit drugs. Either way, the criminal cartels are exploiting a border, and I keep hearing the word, different words about how it's controlled. It's not effectively managed right now, and until it is, the cartels are they're the winners of this.
Those of you on the other side of the aisle, you can continue to wear blinders, or you can do photo op trips like the president did down to El Paso, where they clean up that region before he comes in. You can do that. But the American people are seeing very clearly what's going on. And now that we're in the majority, we're going to try to identify this as much as possible, because you're hearing the truth here from people like the sheriff, from the fentanyl families. And I hope you're meeting with those fentanyl families, because it's directly tied to the border. I want to just close with this. I hope as we go through this process, we also get more information out in regards to the NGOs, the International Organization for Migration, which has weaponized immigration into this country all the way from Panama up to the southern border. I hope we dig in deep to those NGOs that are complicit in the greatest human trafficking operation perhaps in the history of the world. I yield back.